Hello, my name's Tom, and I'm going to be talking about F1 Fantasy, but with a difference today. So instead of doing my usual team selection videos ahead of a F1 race, in this video, we've had a few races now. We've had 7 races so far this season, and I've had time to sort of digest what's going on in F1 Fantasy this season, and I feel this kind of responsibility, almost to myself, to express my feelings about the game. I know I've got quite a few people that watch my videos and would share the same feelings as I'm about to express in this game. And it kind of, yeah, I don't want this to be a massive moan, but I'm basically in this video I'm going to be going over what I think is currently wrong with the F1 Fantasy game, and what can be done to amend it. And the very unlikely event, if an F1 Fantasy developer happens to come across this video, if I had a direct line to them, I would be like, there are some things I would like to change, but there's one thing that I would like you to change more than anything. If you could please change it right now before we go to the next race, is the pricing, because the pricing this season is the main issue, and it's having knock-on effects on other aspects of the game. But the main issue is the pricing this season. I've got my team up at the moment, which probably looks similar to most of your guys' team, because it's unfortunately the way the pricing's set up is kind of locked us into these teams for the foreseeable future until the pricing's changed. So what is the problem with the pricing? The problem with the pricing is Red Bull, who anyone who knows anything about F1, if you watch any of the races this season in particular, we know that Red Bull are extremely strong. They are far, far ahead of everyone else on the grid, and they're winning just about every single race. And it's kind of crazy that you can afford all three of their assets in your team. Max Verstappen is arguably the best driver in the best car, and he's just winning every race every week. And you can put him in your team quite easily, and you can also put the DRS boost on him. The fact you can put the DRS boost on him as well is just like another nail in the coffin that everyone basically has to run Max Verstappen, which reduces variation in our teams because he's affordable and he's probably going to win every race, so you can just DRS boost him. So straight away you've lost one slot in your team, there's no variation there. The fact you can also afford Perez and Red Bull Racing as a constructor without hampering the rest of the team, the fact you can afford them at all, in my opinion, the Red Bulls should be so expensive that you could only feasibly probably get one of them in your team, maybe two, with if you manage to put in some budget options. But the fact you can easily afford all three options as Red Bull is kind of criminal in terms of the points and pricing structure of the F1 Fantasy game this year. And like I say, it's having the effect that the huge majority of anyone engaged in the game this season is just tripling up on Red Bull and are just accumulating huge amount of points. But the problem is everyone's doing that, so there's no variation, and everyone's getting the same amount of points. And every week the only variation really is in your budget driver or what chip you might have used and that sort of thing. Because the knock-on effect is be able to afford these Red Bull drivers. The knock-on effect is the remaining slots in your team, and the remaining slots of your team are also affected by the pricing, because Aston Martin, who so far this season have been the second best team, are hugely underpriced, and they've been hugely underpriced all season, and nothing's been done to address the pricing issue. The pricing is clearly based on the last race only, as opposed to trying to meet a target of points per million or something. So Fernando Alonso, for example, was you see he's on 178 points here, but he's only worth 9.4 million. He's outscoring Hamilton, you can see here, on 174 points, but he costs 24 million. So you can see the massive imbalance here. Why on earth would you go with Lewis Hamilton at 174 points for 24 million when you can just, an absolute bargain price get Fernando Alonso? And that's why 82% of people own Fernando Alonso. And it's not just Alonso Hamilton, it's the whole Aston Martin assets. It's all of them, all three of them. The fact you can just slide them in alongside the Red Bulls, you've basically got the best team and the second best team on the grid filling out 6 out of the 7 slots in our team this season, and you shouldn't be able to do that. Shouldn't be able to do it. In other games, can you imagine in FPL, anyone that plays a fantasy Premier League game, imagine if you could just pack half your team out with Man City players, the other half with Arsenal or Liverpool, whoever you want, whoever's up the top of the table these days, put them all in, and then just have 1 or 2 slots where there's someone from a relegation team. It's just criminal that you can pack out your team this much. And I know this sounds like a massive moan, and it kind of is turning into a little bit of a moan, but this is the issue, and the prices each week are not changing. Look at the price changes from Spain last week. Verstappen's gone up 0.1. Alonso, Stroll, and Aston Martin didn't even go up. Sonoda, who had a pretty decent race, also didn't go up. Red Bull gone up this tiny little margin. It's not even 1% of their entire value. Perez, who he had bad qualifying but worked his way forward, had a good chunk of points, 27 points I think he scored in Spain, didn't go up. And then you've got all the budget drivers who, minus one, minus one, minus one, minus one. They're losing value every week. The budget drivers are kind of the real casualties this season, because the point scoring is so top heavy, and because we can pack in all the top teams. We're left with just this one budget slot each week, basically. And the budget guys, they only really get points from positions gained and overtakes. And I think the points scoring is another big issue in this game, in that the budget people don't have good opportunities to score points. So why would you go with anyone other than the triple Red Bull, triple Aston Martin? Why would you go like with Mercedes as a constructor? Because they're so expensive compared to the likes of Aston Martin. It would force you to put like double budget driver in instead of just the one budget driver. And the budget drivers on average are probably scoring, well, I can have a quick look at go to the spreadsheet, look at the PPR trend. Look at all these budget drivers from sort of this area down. You see on average they're scoring, well, Ocon's not really a budget driver, from De Vries down, they're averaging 1 point per race, 7 points per race, or that Stroll, 5 points per race, 4.9, 7.7 from Guan Yu Zhou, minus 1.9 after 7 races. On average, Albon is averaging minus points per race because it's so hard for budget guys to score. Sargent's averaging 0 points per race. Hulkenberg and Magnussen also not doing too great, at around about 4 and 7 points. So the budget guys are seriously struggling for points this year. You could easily amend that by adding in like teammate points. If you're for example, if Albon finishes ahead of Sargent, he picks up 2 points. There you go. And then it adds variation to the budget picks that we want. Again, last year we had points for getting into, just for qualifying in Q1, you get a point. Qualifying in Q2, you get a couple of points. Simple little fixes, which are not complicated for the developers to install into the game, would enable these budget guys to score a little bit more points, and just reduces the huge top heavy nature when we look at what these guys down here are scoring to the guys at the top. Hamilton on averaging 25 points, Verstappen miles ahead on 45 points almost, Perez 34. The game's too top heavy, and the budget drivers are just getting penalised massively this season. And the fact that the budget drivers are so rubbish this season, that means you only want that one slot, so you're never going to put anyone more expensive than Aston Martin in your team, like the Mercedes, because the Mercedes, if you look at them, 25 million, even if they are the second best team now, you're not going to switch them out for Aston Martin because of the price difference. Aston Martin's still here at 7 million, which is absolutely absurd. So yeah, the budget drivers definitely need some more point scoring possibility. I don't think the developers will do it at any point this season. Perhaps they'll look to it next season if they're that bothered, but I don't think they're going to change the point scoring. But one thing they can definitely change is the pricing. They could easily just change the price, reset everyone to 100 million or whatever, and just change the prices to what they should be appropriately priced. We know that they had the testing. They had testing at the beginning of the season. They should have seen how strong Aston Martin were going to be, and they didn't price them appropriately, and they've done nothing to adjust those prices since the beginning of the season. They've actually gone up like less than $1 million or whatever it is since the beginning of the season. Stroll's been hovering around this sort of 7.5 million the entire season, even though he's still a bargain at, as an Aston Martin asset. One other thing I'd want to talk about, apart from the price and the points, well, I guess an expansion of the point scoring situation, is the DNF penalty this year. Last year it was minus 10, and I think minus 10 is probably about the right figure. It gives you, something to think about, and you want to pick reliable teams, but you're not worried about it every week. But the main thing, particularly on top of the fact that the budget drivers struggle to score points, having minus 20 for a DNF, when DNFs are largely completely unpredictable, gives no engagement to fantasy managers. It just makes you feel bad when it happens, because it's like, oh, minus 20 on a random thing that you just cannot predict whatsoever. This game should be more about predicting who's going to score points, and who's going to potentially beat their teammate or get into Q2, get into Q3, who's going to score points, and this game shouldn't be about negative points. We shouldn't be, as fantasy managers, really having to worry about who's going to be scoring negative points. I don't know. This might just be my own personal gripe, but I think we should be looking. It's much more exciting to play a game when you're gaining points, but when you get a massive hit of minus 20, it just makes you feel a bit sour, to be honest. And the fact that the budget guys are struggling so much to score points in the first place, if they get 1 or 2 DNFs, that's why the likes of Albon are scoring negative points on average across the season, because it's so hard. You get minus 20. If a budget driver scores 5, 10, maybe 15 points a race, you're delighted. If they score 15 points a race, you're delighted. If they score 10 points a race, pretty good. If they score 5 points a race, you're happy just because they haven't DNF'd. But if they DNF minus 20, it's going to make up. It's going to take them another 3, 4, 5, 6 races, or in Albon's case, it still hasn't quite broken even on the 0 points. It takes them so long to climb back up. So I think on top of the fact that the budget guys don't score well, and just in general that it's a feel bad point scoring system, the minus 20 needs to be scrapped. Reduce it down to minus 10, so it's still something to think about, but it's not just this massive looming disappointment when it happens in your team. So to sum up, basically, the main issue is the pricing, and the F1 fantasy developers. It's only seven races in. We're not even a third of the way through the season yet. There is time. I feel if the F1 fantasy developers are watching this video, I would say don't worry about messing up the budgets and everything of everyone right now. There's still time to make this game much more enjoyable for the remainder of the season, adding much more variation in. Please, F1 fantasy developers, if you end up watching this video, or even though I find that highly unlikely, but if anyone is out there that has the ability to change things, then please, if there's one thing you change, please change the pricing. Just whatever it takes. I'm sure there are multiple ways you could do it. The obvious way is just to reset everyone to 100 million and put Fernando Alonso up to like 20 million, Lance Stroll probably around 10 million, Verstappen should be closer to 35, 40 million. Just make those changes, please, and then think about the other changes that I've spoken about. I'm sure there's a few other things that could be tweaked to make the game better. But yeah, I do think, actually one other thing that it could definitely be improved. Again, I'm arcing back to last season, and I can't believe I'm like kind of missing play on at this point, but the fact that they had streaks last year as well is also another big thing. And I know they're not going to implement streaks halfway through the season, but maybe for next season that could be something that the developers would consider. Having race streaks and qualifying streaks was a great way to add variation, and the fact of the matter is we don't have streaks, and because of the pricing and the point scoring, we don't have much variation at all in our teams. If you had streaks, if you said this guy, if you get into Q3, whatever, 5 times in a row, then you can get a bonus 10, 20 points, whatever it is, then people would change their teams around to pick people in those streaks, and rightfully so, and we would add variation, we would add decision making to F1 fantasy managers, actual decision making going into a deadline. And decision making is what we are craving. At the moment, there's a lack of decision making, therefore a lack of variation, a lack of point scoring. When you have a good week, you score like 300 points. When you have a bad week, you score like 280 points. There's hardly any difference because we've all got the same teams. So it's really hard to find the difference, and particularly for managers that are really engaged and focused on the game and want to, extract every point that they can out of the game. Like probably most of my viewers, that's why they watch my videos in the first place. We want as many decisions as we can, basically. We want that decision making, we want that variation, and then looking at the data, looking at the form of the teams, the tracks, and we can take all that into account and pick a team that we think is going to do well, rather than just pick a team because we're forced into it because of the pricing. And that's kind of where I feel a lot of managers are feeling very frustrated and disappointed so far this season. That's how I feel at the moment. And I'm going to continue playing F1 Fantasy, and I'm going to continue making videos about F1 Fantasy. But my life would be a lot easier and a lot happier when I'm doing that sort of content if the prices were adjusted and we could have a proper game. And I know there are other games out there. I'm sure I'll get comments from people, rightfully so, saying there are other F1 Fantasy games that you can play. You don't have to play the official one, but I am playing the official one, and I wish the official one would just listen to its fan base a little bit. And because F1 Fantasy is definitely much more mainstream now. You hear a lot of people talking about it when you watch the F1 live shows on the Grand Prix weekend and the weekend warm up with Will Buxton and his crew. They quite often talk about F1 Fantasy, and it's great that F1 Fantasy is getting more coverage, and there are a lot more people playing this year. I think there's over 2 million teams this year, which is the most it's ever had, and that's fantastic. And it would be a real shame for the game itself to lose its player base, particularly as it's on the cusp of really exploding, having loads and loads of people really engaged and interested in the game. But if you're going to come in and you see the state of the game is at the moment, F1 Fantasy they're going to lose players. People are going to become disengaged with it, and there's going to be a general lack of interest, and I think that they'll lose their player base, which will be a real shame because I think it's got the potential to be such a great game, and it's just struggling at the moment. And with a few very easy, simple to implement changes, we can have back the game that we love. Anyway, that kind of sums up my feelings. Again, I'm sorry if it's come across as moany. I don't want to be moany and negative, but I feel a bit of the responsibility to speak up about this thing, as I've got an F1 Fantasy channel, and I feel like I need to just I don't know, just express my feelings a little bit to you guys. Hopefully, I imagine a lot of you will be feeling the same way. So even if this video gets nowhere, and at least maybe then you can share in my frustration a little bit. And it's good to talk about things when things are bothering you. It's good to talk about things. So yeah, this is kind of a way of talking about what's bothering me at the moment. And yeah, the state of the game is bothering me. So it's nice to have this little chat. And yeah, let me know in the comments what you think could be improved on. What would you change, or are you enjoying the game? What are the good things about it? Because it's still a decent game. It's just it could be so much better if they change the prices, etc., and all the other things I talked about. But yeah, anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. Do you agree with me? Have I just talked a lot of rubbish and the game's fine? Yeah, let me know if there's anything I've missed, and if you really, if you really want to try, put this in front of the noses of some F1 fantasy developers, then send it their way. If anyone's out there that has contacts, then send them this way and make them change the prices, please, for the love of God. Right, thanks very much. I'm going to sign off for now, and I'll be back ahead of the Canada Grand Prix for some more team selection videos. So thanks very much, and bye bye.